The turbolift climbs. Vader stands in rigid silence beside his son. Luke's hands are bound, his head bowed, his presence in the Force steady and strange. Calm, yes, but not the calm of surrender. There is a faint sound. Vader hears it first. Not a weapon, not boots. Something else. A low, buried tremor, like distant machinery that never quite resolves into a single source. He glances sideways at Luke's robe. Nothing. They step from the lift into polished corridors and walk the long path to the throne room. Stormtroopers watch them pass and feel that odd vibration in their armor, just faint enough to doubt, just present enough to unsettle. No one speaks. No one questions. The great doors part. The throne room opens before them in cold imperial symmetry. A pit, a view of the half-finished superstructure, the Emperor seated in his raised chair, turned away, wrapped in shadow and certainty. He spins to face them with that practiced theatrical slowness he clearly enjoys far too much. Welcome, young Skywalker. Luke looks up. He does not flinch. He does not bow. He simply studies the man who has haunted every vision, every warning, every whispered fear, the one the Jedi could not stop, the one his father could not escape. The Emperor smiles. Your journey to the dark side is nearly complete. He believes that entirely. That is the problem. Luke does not answer, does not argue, does not ignite his saber. Instead, he draws a slow breath, as if testing the air, as if checking with someone, or something. Vader feels it again, that hum, not in the metal, in the space around his son. Palpatine leans forward on the throne. Strike me down. Take your father's place at my side. Luke's hand rises, not to his saber, to his robe clasp. Luke steps forward, just enough to stand in the full wash of the overhead light. He unhooks his belt. Fingers move to the front of his black tunic. Every guard tenses, expecting a hidden blaster, perhaps a secondary blade. Vader tightens his grip on his own saber, ready to intercept the slightest flicker of treachery. Luke opens his robe. No weapon falls. Beneath the dark cloth is only a pale undertunic, and beneath that, the sound arrives properly, first as a shiver in the air, then as a layered vibration, then as a single overwhelming presence. A hum, gathering like a storm. Luke closes his eyes. Something moves inside the folds of his clothing, inside specially sewn compartments, inside carefully constructed channels of fabric and mesh that no one ever thought to scan because no one, anywhere in this galaxy, considered living swarm a likely smuggling option. The robe ripples, then splits. The swarm erupts. They pour out of him like smoke turned solid, a cloud of gold and black and beating wings, boiling upward into the vaulted chamber. 10,000 bees. Not wild, not confused. They move as one Palpatine recoils in pure instinctive horror, the kind that overrides training, doctrine, and decades of manipulation. His hands go up, not in a forced gesture, but in the simple, universal attempt to cover his face. The royal guards step forward, then stop. There's absolutely no tactical manual for this. The bees swirl in a tight, controlled spiral around Luke, forming for a moment a living cloak, as if waiting for instruction. Luke lifts his hand. Fingers slightly spread. This is the will of the hive. He does not shout it. He does not need to. The Force bends around him in a pattern Vader has never felt before. Not the sharp, honed edge of combat, not the distant, serene flow of meditation. Something communal, layered. 1,000 tiny lives braided into one intent. The swarm turns. Every wing angles toward the Emperor. Palpatine has seen armies break. He has watched worlds burn. He has orchestrated entire wars by the tilt of a finger and the tone of a single command. Fear is his instrument. It is not supposed to be his experience. The bees advance. He tries to recover his composure, to reclaim the stage. You dare! The first arc of blue lightning lashes out from his fingers, leaping into the swarm with a crack that shakes the railings. Several bees fall, tiny bodies smoking. The rest simply adjust. They flex around the strike like water around a stone, filling the space again as soon as it passes. Palpatine's mouth tightens. The next burst is wider, stronger. It hits the mass, the floor, the walls, Vader's armor, the guards' pikes, The viewing window, everything the bees keep coming. Palpatine's mask breaks. I am severely allergic. There is actual panic in his voice now. No theatrical gravel, no measured cruelty, just a raw, very mortal terror of something he cannot intimidate. They reach him? Down his sleeves, beneath his cloak, across his neck, his cheeks, the fragile skin around his eyes. He swats, but they slip between his fingers, climbing, probing, relentless. One reaches his lips, then another. He tries to speak. Stay back. They do not. Several disappear into his mouth. The most powerful Sith Lord in the galaxy staggers, gagging, choking on living defiance that does not care about his titles, his rank, or his claims of inevitability. The Royal Guards, to their credit, last almost 3 breaths longer than anyone might expect. Then one sees a single bee land on the ridge of his visor and simply drops his pike. No! He turns and walks away. The others follow. One does not bother with the lift and instead chooses the nearest vertical shaft. They are not paid nearly enough for this high above. The bees envelop the throne. Palpatine vanishes into the swarm. Luke stands perfectly still amid the storm he has unleashed. This is balance. The throne room for once does not belong to the Emperor. Lightning scars the floor. The air smells of ozone and something faintly sweet. Palpatine thrashes within the swarm, every movement slower than the last. Vader watches. The old reflex still whispers, defend the master, restore control, burn the threat from the air. But the force around Luke is quiet. Not righteous fury, not blind hatred, but purpose. I thought we were here to speak, Vader says at last. Luke turns his head, just slightly. We were, he answers. You chose your side long ago. He chose his. I chose mine. You were to face him, Vader insists. Test yourself. Prove your strength. There was still a path. Luke's gaze returns to the swarm. His path ended the moment he decided no one else's life mattered. I have no more lessons to learn from him. Palpatine claws at the armrest, manages to raise his head long enough to rasp. Anakin, command them. You will obey me. And there it is again. The name. The chain. Vader feels the tug in his chest. The old command structure that once turned clone regiments. Jedi, entire fleets at a single word he could act. He could step forward, cut through the swarm, drag his son to his knees, restore the old nightmare. He does nothing. Luke slips a small device from his sleeve, its surface worn, its single control studiously simple. He depresses it with his thumb. Elsewhere, on some unseen carrier or disguised transport, a subroutine fires. A tiny, encoded signal, inaudible to any ear, runs along metallic corridors, through transmitters, through the force-attuned minds of insects that have been guided, shaped, taught. The swarm flickers. Their pattern shifts from simple assault to complex geometry, settling into a series of concentric rings that spin slowly around Luke and Vader, then around the throne itself. It looks, for a brief instant, like a shield woven from light and sound. Luke lowers the device. Let the hive be heard. Vader takes an involuntary step back. For the first time in years, he is not the most frightening presence in the room. The bees do not remain contained. That would be wasteful. They expand. A portion of the swarm streams toward the ceiling, flowing into every seam and maintenance gap, dividing into smaller, coordinated clusters. Within minutes, the battle station feels it. In one sector, a turbolift shudders to a stop between levels as a wave of black and gold pours through the vent above the car. The troopers inside stare upward, slowly realizing they are outnumbered by a factor large enough to be considered structural. In the detention block, prisoners press against the bars as the constant, precise hum builds in the walls. The officers at the control station exchange a glance they will never admit contained fear. Elsewhere, in the primary hangar, a flight officer frantically waves squadrons toward launch. Get into space. Now. 3 fighters blast free of the racks, engines screaming to full power. The pilots reach for their targeting arrays, and find the display's solid black. Then the black moves. Tiny shapes crawl across the inside of the optics. Control, I have visual contamination. The first fighter shears sideways into the hangar wall. The second follows. The third simply spins in place, the pilot too busy slapping at his flight suit to remember the existence of steering. On the command deck, a sensor officer stares at a screen filling with cascading alerts. System integrity, degraded. Coolant flow, obstructed. Biological contaminant, present. Detail, Aphidy-class organisms detected. He reads the last line twice. Bees. The main reactor chamber, designed to harness unimaginable power with cold precision, suddenly has to contend with living interference. Clusters of insects settle along conduits and coolant fins, drawn by warmth and subtle electromagnetic fields, completely uninterested in the Empire's energy budget. Heat starts to climb in patterns the designers never considered. Auxiliary droids trundle toward the problem and immediately wheel in the opposite direction, buzzing signals of distress as they vanish into secondary corridors. One power regulation node flickers and displays a final, despairing message before shutting itself down. Emergency priority, biological incursion. Recommended action, evacuate central sector. No one sees it. No one hears the faint, entirely undignified shriek of a power droid somewhere on sub-level 43 as it discovers bees inside its casing. The Death Star does not fear because it is metal in calculation, but its systems react as if it does. Lights dim, doors lock and unlock in confused cycles. Warning klaxons start, stop, and simply give up. Behind all of it, the hum grows. Back in the throne room, the Emperor refuses to accept an outcome he did not script. He pulls himself upright, body shaking, eyes wild. His voice has lost its theatrical edge. It is hoarse and snapping. You think insects can end me? He hurls his hands outward. The storm answers. Force lightning erupts again, this time not as a focused strike, but as a wild, encompassing tempest. It tears through consoles, carves scorch lines along the floor, shatters decorative columns purely out of spite. Two royal guards who were unwise enough to peek back into the room are flung aside like discarded cloaks, armor smoking. The bees stagger in the blast, many falling, but the swarm as a whole reshapes, reforming the outer layers, drones shifting places, surrounding their queenless objective with mechanical determination that has nothing to do with fear and everything to do with instinct made obedient by the Force. Palpatine rises, cloak tattered, eyes blazing. You will yield! The air pressure drops. Vader feels it in the joints of his armor, in the subtle compressions of servo motors used to a very specific atmospheric norm. Palpatine is crushing the room itself, dragging at every molecule, trying to force the bees out. The air out, everything out that is not him. Panels buckle. The great window groans. The bees remain. They cling to surfaces, to fabric, to each other, wings beating in careful counter-rhythm, tiny bodies pushing back against a will that has dominated entire eras. Palpatine's control falters. His breath comes in ragged pulls. His skin has shifted from pallid to swollen. He lurches toward the doors, swatting, stumbling. Out of my way! He makes it 3 steps into the corridor. No guards, no officers, no one left to see him like this. He falls to his knees. One bee, late to the assault, drifts down and settles in the deep line between his brows. His reddened eyes try to focus on the tiny shape, unlimited hive. His head meets the floor. The swarm hangs over him for a moment, their work complete. Then they turn away, leaving the most feared being in the galaxy lying alone in a corridor, felled not by prophecy or chosen blades, but by a child of Felucia's acid jungles and a farm boy's unorthodox study habits. Silence returns in stages. One by one, the last arcs of lightning fade from the walls. The consoles die their final, flickering deaths. Luke breathes out, slow and steady. The bees that remain in the throne room drift back to him, landing on his sleeves, his shoulders, the edges of his robe. Several simply circle his head like a living crown, and then move on, satisfied Vader's respirator is the loudest sound now. The Emperor is dead, he says quietly. Luke nods. He was finished long before the hive arrived. They simply carried the truth the last few steps. Vader looks at his son, at the quiet certainty, at the weapon that was not rage, not hate, not even a blade. You could have tried to turn him, Vader says. No, Luke answers. I have seen what he left behind. There was nothing left to reach. He turns toward the lift. The doors, damaged by earlier surges, judder halfway open and stick. The bees go first. They pour through the gap in two shimmering lines, forming a column on either side of the corridor beyond. An honor guard of wings and patience, Luke steps forward. The swarm holds its formation perfectly, not a single insect touching him as he walks between them. Vader hesitates. For the first time since Mustafar, the route ahead is not dictated by orders. There is no command structure left, no emperor to obey, no doctrine to cling to. Only his son, walking out of a room his master never intended anyone to leave, Vader follows. One stormtrooper, leaning against a wall and trying very hard not to scream, as a single bee explores the edge of his pauldron, sees them approach Luke. Vader, the corridor of living, humming warning on either side. He could raise his rifle. He could shout. Instead, he slowly lowers the blaster, places it on the floor, and steps back with a stiff, confused approximation of a bow. No one stops them. Outside the station, rebel ships close in for the final assault. Pilots brace for turbo laser fire that does not come. Gun emplacements stand empty. Targeting arrays are clogged with small, furious life. On a Mon Calamari cruiser, a tactical officer frowns at the incoming data. There is no defensive pattern, he murmurs. The station appears abandoned. In the briefing chamber, minds argue. Some call for immediate destruction. The superlaser may still be repaired. The risk is too great. Others hesitate. Sensors return odd readings. Unusual atmospheric changes, vast biological presence where there should be only metal. In the end, a decision forms. The shield that once protected the Death Star from attack is reconfigured. Not to defend the weapon. To keep the rest of the galaxy at a safe distance from whatever the station is becoming. Because the Death Star is no longer a battle station. Piece by piece, corridor by corridor, it is transforming into a hive. The Empire fractures. The celebrations on Endor are loud, messy, filled with creatures who do not fully understand politics but recognize when something oppressive has cracked. Luke does not stay long at the fires. He walks into the forest. Beyond the wreckage of walkers and bunkers, to the edge of a cleared space that once held the generator which shielded a terror. Here, he builds something else. Stone by stone, with Ewok labor and Alliance engineers in his own hands, a new structure rises. Low walls at first, then simple, open halls. Rooms that breathe with the forest, rather than sealing it out. Terraces layered in greenery. Nesting boxes built into the outer ring. A central courtyard with flowering trees from half a dozen worlds, carefully transplanted, tended, and watched. The Hive Temple. It does not call itself that, of course. Temples rarely name themselves, but the name passes quickly from mouth to mouth, and no one finds a better one. Here, Jedi training begins again. Not as it was. There are no councils, no tiers of authority raised high above the rest, no doors forbidden by tradition. There are gardens. There are hives. Younglings learn to hold a training saber and a smoker in the same day, to listen for the subtle shift in wing tone that signals agitation, to enter a meditative state so calm that a swarm will pass over their skin without a single sting. They learn to feel many minds at once, to find balance not in isolation, but in cooperation. A lesson the previous order never fully embraced. Luke walks among them, robes rolled up, hands sticky with honey after assisting with a frame inspection. He speaks softly, rarely raising his voice. If they trust you, he tells a nervous initiate as bees crawl across the boy's sleeve. They will not strike, but you must be present. Not rigid, not fearful. The boy nods. A bee settles briefly on Luke's gloved hand, then returns to its work. Leia visits once she stands at the edge of a training field, watching a line of apprentices practice saber forms flanked by drifting clusters of bees. This is not how I imagined the future, she says dryly. Luke smiles. Neither did I, but it is better than I expected. She shakes her head, faintly amused, faintly horrified. I will keep my council chamber, she replies. You keep your hives. They embrace. They part. Han appears often enough to be suspected of enjoying the place. I still don't understand it, he admits one evening, leaning against a stone pillar as the sun sinks beyond the trees. But if it keeps you from jumping in front of every blaster in the galaxy, I'll take it. Luke does not answer. He does not promise. But for now, there is peace. Peace, of course, is what invites commentary. Twilight settles over the hive temple. Lanterns glow along the walkways. Bees drift home in slow, tired arcs, heavy with the day's harvest. Luke sits in the central courtyard, surrounded by students attempting a particularly delicate exercise, maintaining a calm, unified meditation while a single hive is encouraged, gently, to move from one structure to another. It is going well. Too well, perhaps. The air shimmers at the edge of the grove. Two figures coalesce in the dim light. Old robes, old faces blue and translucent, and very clearly not resting as much as legend suggests they should. Obi-Wan folds his arms. "So," he says quietly, "this is what you have done with the Order." Yoda narrows his eyes, ears tilting forward. "Strange, this is," he murmurs. "Powerful, unpredictable." Luke does not turn. He continues to guide the students, voice low, steady. "Do not force the hive," he tells them. "Invite it. If you push, they will resist. If you offer, they will decide." Only when the last cluster has settled into the new frame does he rise, dust off his knees, and face the ghosts. "Master," he says to Obi-Wan. "Master Yoda." Obi-Wan glances pointedly at the hives, at the children, at the bees drifting lazily around them like small, patient guardians. "This is not the restoration I imagined when I spoke of another hope," he admits. Luke nods once. "That may be why it has a chance to endure." Yoda taps his staff on the flagstones, though the sound is more memory than substance. "Dangerous the swarm," he warns. "Hard to guide. Many wills, not one. Break. This balance may, if turned." Luke meets his gaze without flinching. "So may any order," he replies. "We built one before that thought discipline alone would save it. It did not listen to those beneath it. It did not bend until it broke." He gestures gently toward the hives. They do not follow a single queen forever. They replace. They adapt. They divide rather than rot from within. Obi-Wan sighs, an old sound full of sand and regret. "Luke, this path is untested." "All the others have failed," Luke answers. "I would rather try something alive than repeat something dead." There is no retort ready for that. The ghosts look out over the temple. A youngling laughs as a bee lands on his nose and then buzzes away. In the distance, a familiar black figure kneels beside a bed of wildflowers, carefully transplanting new growth into richer soil. Vader, no armor now, no mask, only the ruined man inside, pauses as a bee crawls across his scarred hand. "I know," he tells it quietly. "I have stung enough for one lifetime." A nearby student frowns. "Master Anakin, you missed a frame on the far hive." Anakin Skywalker, gardener, exhales something that might once have been a bitter laugh. "I deserve worse," he says, and rises to fix the mistake. Yoda watches him for a long time. "Hard to trust this is," he admits at last. "But watching, we shall be." The ghosts fade, their forms dissolving back into the greater light of the Force. The temple remains. The bees return to their steady work. So what if Luke did not throw his saber aside in the name of redemption? What if he looked at the galaxy, at the Empire, at the cycle of Sith and Jedi, of masters and apprentices, of orders that demanded obedience and empires that demanded fear, and decided that the cleanest way to remove a rot that deep was neither blade nor plea, but a hive? The Emperor died not in a beam of his own power, but alone in a corridor, brought down by a weakness he could never accept, and an opponent too small to tempt the most terrifying weapon ever built did not vanish in fire. It drifted from strategic target to ecological concern, encased in shielding and caution, its halls slowly consumed by honeycomb and hum. A new temple grew not from marble towers on galactic capitals, but from stone and wood beside a forest clearing, where children learned to listen before they spoke, and to consider many minds before trusting only their own. The Jedi returned, not as aloof guardians with distant gazes, but as keepers and caretakers, moving carefully among living systems they could not fully control, and therefore had to respect the Force. This has been Canon Chaos.